Imagine standing in the open, bare-skinned, with no fire, no fur thick enough to matter, and a winter wind cutting toward you faster than any predator ever could. For nearly 2 million years, something like this was simply life. Long before hearths, before flint sparked reliably into flame, our ancestors faced falling temperatures with almost nothing standing between them and the cold. And yet they survived. The question is how? The uncomfortable truth is that fire, the thing we imagine as humanity's oldest survival tool, wasn't always there to save us. Evidence for controlled, reliable fire use only becomes widespread around 400,000 years ago, though scattered traces suggest some hominins were experimenting with it even earlier, perhaps as far back as 1 million years. But species in the human lineage were already living through freezing seasons long before that. So for enormous stretches of our evolutionary story, staying alive in winter meant relying on the body itself and on strategies that had nothing to do with flame. The first line of defense wasn't technology, it was geography. Early hominins in Africa rarely faced true winter at all, which is part of why fire wasn't urgent yet. As populations pushed north into what is now Europe and Asia, they encountered cold seasons for the first time, and their survival depended on choosing where to be. Caves and rock shelters weren't just convenient, they were life-saving. A cave holds a strikingly stable temperature year-round, often staying well above the freezing air outside, simply because deep rock is insulated from the extremes above ground. Living inside one wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was thermodynamics. Then there's the body itself, which had already been quietly adapting for millions of years. Compare a modern human skeleton to that of a hominin who lived in a colder climate like the Neanderthals, and you notice something striking. Their bodies were shorter and stockier, with wider torsos and shorter limbs, a shape that reduces surface area relative to body mass. That might sound like a minor detail, but it matters enormously for heat retention, because less surface area means less exposed skin losing warmth to the air. It's the same principle you see in cold climate animals today. A fox in the Arctic has short, rounded ears. A fox in the desert has enormous ones. Heat escapes through surface area, and evolution never stops doing this kind of quiet arithmetic. But bodies alone couldn't have been enough. The real breakthrough, long before fire, may have been something almost too simple to notice: clothing that didn't yet exist as we know it. Researchers studying stone tools have found evidence of scrapers used to prepare animal hides for tens of thousands of years before the earliest confirmed sewing needles appear in the archaeological record. That gap is telling. It suggests early humans were wrapping themselves in hides long before they could tailor them, draping and binding skins around the body rather than stitching fitted garments. It wouldn't have been elegant, but an animal's fur, still attached to its hide, is an extraordinarily effective insulator, because trapped air, not the material itself, is what actually holds in warmth. And this raises a haunting question. If you had no fire and no fitted clothing, how did you kill the animal whose hide you needed in the first place, in the cold, with a body only partly adapted to it? The answer seems to lie in something humans still do better than almost any other species: persistence. Long before spears were common, some researchers argue early hominins may have relied on endurance to exhaust prey animals over long pursuits, a method sometimes called persistence hunting. Human sweat glands, unusually dense and evenly distributed across our skin, allow us to cool ourselves while moving, something four-legged animals, panting instead of sweating, struggle to do over sustained effort. In warmer months, this made humans startlingly effective hunters. In winter, cold itself may have shortened the advantage, but it also meant prey was often weaker, slower, and easier to overtake, animals already burning precious fat reserves just to stay alive. There's also the matter of what wasn't hunted at all. Fat, not meat, may have been the true prize in cold seasons. Bone marrow, rich and calorie-dense, could be extracted using nothing more than a rock to crack the shaft, and it offered something lean meat alone could not: enough energy density to fuel a body working overtime just to stay warm. Some researchers have gone so far as to argue that access to marrow, scavenged from carcasses other predators had already stripped of flesh, may have been just as important to early human survival as hunting itself. And then there's behavior, the part of survival that leaves no fossils but may have mattered as much as biology. Huddling together for warmth, sheltering downwind of rock formations, timing movement to the warmest parts of the day. None of this required intelligence in the way we usually measure it, but it required something almost as valuable: attentiveness to a body's signals and the social bonds to act on them together. A solitary hominin facing a harsh winter had far worse odds than one embedded in a group willing to share warmth, food, and shelter. What emerges isn't a single dramatic solution, but a quiet accumulation of small advantages: cooler adapted bodies, instinctive use of natural shelter, rough clothing made from patience rather than skill, hunting strategies built on endurance instead of weapons, and the simple, ancient act of staying close to others when the temperature dropped. None of it was foolproof. Many individuals, and likely entire small groups, didn't survive their first hard winters. But enough did, generation after generation, for their adaptations, both biological and behavioral, to be passed forward. Which means the fire we now credit with civilizing us wasn't the thing that got us through winter in the first place. It was, in some sense, the reward for having already learned how to survive without it. By the time flame became a reliable companion, our ancestors had already spent hundreds of thousands of years figuring out how to be cold and still live. Fire didn't rescue humanity from winter. It simply made surviving it a little less desperate.